difficult country.
Everything that happens here is going to affect every other place in the world.
When stakes are so high, we will keep fighting.
You were born for this moment.
I'm ready to win.
We aim every night to be factual and fair. That's our goal.
Tonight, major travel disruptions as the Northeast digs out from heavy snow. Then, as many struggle to pay back their student loans, what are the consequences of skipping payments? And new rules for those who test positive for COVID on the CBS Evening News.
Responsibility now falls on Speaker Johnson and House Republicans to approve this bill swiftly.
Well, I think the polls are the same that we saw in New Hampshire, and I moved 25 points in the last 3 weeks of the race.
I am the person that wants to change what's happening in Washington, D.C. by getting people to work together.
This is about saving our country. This is about taking our country to the right direction.
Hello, everyone. I'm Weijia Jiang in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. President Biden is pushing the House to pass a foreign aid package approved by the Senate earlier today. Senators on both sides of the aisle voted for the $95 billion bill, 70 to 29. But the package, which includes funding for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, faces opposition from multiple House Republicans. In a speech today, President Biden urged Speaker Mike Johnson to bring it to the House floor immediately.
I say to the House members, House Republicans, you got to decide. Are you going to stand up for freedom? Or are you going to side with terror and tyranny? You're going to stand with Ukraine? You're going to stand with Putin? Or we stand with America or with Trump?
CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins us now. Nicole, it's great to see you. It seemed like there was going to be a small group of Republican defectors to try to hold this up. Tell us how this got over the finish line in the Senate.
Well, it got done by working on Super Bowl Sunday, among other things, Weijia, and really working continuously throughout the weekend. You know, ultimately, Leader Schumer kind of called Senate Republicans bluff in terms of, trying to move forward with this package. That is why you saw it voted on in the wee hours of this morning after those Senate Republicans who did oppose it kind of had their chance to get their say-so in on the floor. And many of them wanted to hold up this package and oppose this package because they felt that there should be still some type of border component added to address the crisis at the border. But as you know, that was the part of a package last week that got torpedoed by Senate Republicans, and that's why the Senate moved forward without that border component and strictly focused on the national security measures in terms of, as you pointed out, funding for Israel, Ukraine, the Indo-Pacific, humanitarian assistance. And so now that it has cleared, of course, the question is whether the House will now bring this to the floor, which is a big if. And part of the reason President Biden made that appeal at the White House earlier today to try to prod lawmakers to act.
Yeah, the president's words weren't really new. That message was exactly what he was saying to try to get that other supplemental bill you were talking about over the line. That didn't work. Republicans now, it doesn't seem very likely that they're going to support this, Nicole, since, as you mentioned, it does not include border security, which is what House Speaker Johnson fought for in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And that is something that he continued to reiterate to reporters today, that, national security, before you take national security up, you've got to take up border security, that national security is border security, was the argument that the speaker made to reporters this afternoon. And again, it remains a big open question if he's even going to move forward with this package. He did issue a preemptive statement ahead of that Senate vote saying that this bill really fails to meet the moment. But look, the Speaker has been very critical of both Senate packages. The reason he said the initial supplemental package that included the border provisions was dead on arrival was because it didn't go far enough. He stands by wanting the Senate to consider House Republicans' bill, which is H.R. 2, which is more stringent than that border compromise that was killed last week. At the same time, of course, now you have this stripped down package, and he's saying that, well, we still have to have some component of border in it. So, his hope was maybe the Senate would have amended the bill, which some Republicans tried to do. But again, whether or not this bill is now dead on arrival remains to be seen.
Nicole, Johnson from the very beginning has stressed that H.R. 2 is his goalpost and that he wasn't really going to change that. So short of that, is there any way that Congress can pass any foreign aid?
Well, there are some conversations happening about whether to move forward with some type of discharge petition. That would kind of be on House Democrats to do that and to try to pass it or bring it up through the minority. They would need some Republican support to do that, but it would have to be minimal. And, Leader Jeffries isn't completely ruling that out. He noted in a Dear Colleague letter today that House Democrats stand poised to use any potential legislative tools to try to move this package forward. And he argues that, this funding for Israel is critical. The funding for Ukraine is critical. Having that humanitarian assistance in there for Gaza and other conflict zones is critical, and being able to package all of that together. So the timetable on that remains unclear, but even, he would need all Democrats to support moving some type of discharge petition. And obviously, as you know, there has been some concern, particularly among more progressive Democrats, about Israeli funding, primarily because of the situation between Israel and Hamas. Some progressive Democrats feel that there should be a ceasefire, that Israel has gone too far in how it's handled the situation in Gaza, and some of them do want some conditions attached. So that certainly was an attempt on the part of some Senate Democrats, but again, unclear if progressives will make that an issue in the House in terms of moving forward with some alternate means to try to get this bill going.
Well, Nicole, it certainly looks like it's going to be a tough road ahead, but I know you'll be covering it for us, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet.
Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley is campaigning in South Carolina today ahead of the GOP primary there. But she faces a steep climb in her home state, where former President Trump holds a 35-point advantage, according to a CBS News poll. Meanwhile, the Pennsylvania House of Representatives is up for grabs as voters head to the polls for a special election in the Philadelphia suburbs. Caitlin Huey-Burns and Aaron Navarro join us now. Caitlin is CBS News' political correspondent, and Aaron is a CBS News campaign reporter. Caitlin, let's start with you. Haley has a lot of ground to cover against the former president in South Carolina. Talk to us about what her strategy is to try to win.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Reja. That poll that you mentioned, that 35-point lead, Nikki Haley is the hometown candidate here, but those numbers look like Donald Trump is the favorite son, leading by 35 points. And when you dig down into those numbers, you see that more voters here care more about national issues compared to local ones. So what she has been trying to do here in South Carolina with a bus tour that she's embarked on, that she's on today, is remind voters of what her policies were when she was governor, and also arguing to turn the page from the chaos of Donald Trump. The big challenge, though, however, is that a lot of voters here like Donald Trump. So in almost all of her stump speeches, she says, look, I voted for Donald Trump twice. I served in his administration, but things are different now. And voters that we talk to that are coming to her events that are inclined to support her are inclined to that message. But she still has a lot of work to do to convince those who are favorable to Trump. What she said to me yesterday as we sat down on her campaign bus, I asked her if she was prepared to take this all the way to the convention, and she said she wants a strong showing in South Carolina. They're not saying that they're going to win by any means, but closing the gap here would be considered a victory to them. Then moving moving on to Michigan and then those Super Tuesday states. So she has argued that she doesn't want to make this the longest general election in history with Donald Trump as the nominee. So she's fighting at least till Super Tuesday.
She is also trying to make age a factor, pointing out that she is decades younger than both Trump and Biden. Aaron, you're in a competitive county in Pennsylvania that Democrats have done well in. But I wonder what Democratic voters there are saying about President Biden's age.
Hello from Bucks County. This is a place and county where Biden won by just under 5 points in 2020, and is part of those Philly suburbs that the Biden campaign told me today will be high on their priority list here in Pennsylvania that they have to do well in. But from talking to Democratic voters that came out for this state house special election, I get the sense while age is a factor for this small snapshot of voters, making sure that former President Trump, Biden's likely general election opponent, does not win is also a big factor. Take a listen to some of the voices I heard from today.
It's not a big factor because, I mean, I agree with his policies more, so I'd just like to eventually see more younger people.
Assuming that there is he had a couple miles an hour taken off his fastball, that may very well be, but at the end of the day, I mean, I can't see where it affected any policy decisions.
I think people understand that the president is older. Of course, his likely opponent is also. And so I think at the end of the day, the other issues that we've been talking about transcend that.
So that last voice you heard there was the Democratic Party chair here in Bucks County, and kind of matches some of the sentiment I've been getting from Democratic voters here, that age is a factor, but the alternative to Biden is still heavy on Democratic voters' minds.
Caitlin, I want to ask you about a slew of endorsements that the former President Trump recently made to lead the Republican National Committee. What can you tell us, and what does it tell us about the future of the RNC?
Yeah, Donald Trump is certainly trying to kind of seal his grip on the Republican Party with these endorsements for RNC chair. He is endorsing his daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, to be a co-chair of the RNC, and also tapping to be another co-chair, the chairman of the North Carolina Republican Party, who has echoed Donald Trump's false claims about the 2020 election and false claims that it was fraudulent. And he's also tasking one of his top campaign advisors, Chris LaCivita, to join the RNC in a dual role, also as kind of the chief operating officer, working on the campaign and the RNC. Now, this is an effort by Trump to really, fill the RNC with those who are loyal to him. And he has complained about Ronna McDaniel, who's expected to step down after the South Carolina primary. And he's also pointed to ways in which the RNC has really struggled in fundraising. But this is just the latest sign yet that this is a party that is coalesced around the former president. And what was really important for his campaign is that he did this at the state level, too. And that really influenced the delegate allocation rules in places like Nevada and California and others.
And we have seen time and time again the former president reward his supporters and punish his detractors. Caitlin Huey-Burns and Aaron Navarro, thank you so much. A special election in New York today is deciding who will replace George Santos. We have the latest on the race. You're streaming America Decides.
Well, let me start with this.
This really
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response? You want me to just
What's wrong with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
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 It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. It's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
It can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
Human remains found this week.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
How can we become our best selves? That may be more about character than talent.
The ultimate mark of your potential is how far you've climbed, not how high you've gone.
Realizing your true potential with Adam Grant as we go person to person.
Welcome back to America Decides. Voters in New York's 3rd Congressional District are deciding who will replace expelled Congressman George Santos. Former Democratic Congressman Tom Suozzi is trying to win back the seat he held for 6 years. He is facing off against Nassau County legislator Republican Mazi Pilip. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins us now. Scott, set the stage for us before returns come in. Who are these two candidates, and does it look like one is going to be a clear victor?
Yeah, everything linked or associated to George Santos brings its own theatrics, and today was no exception. This race to succeed or replace George Santos had a snowstorm. It might have impacted turnout, and I think both campaigns were expressing concern about that through the day. Several inches of snow, some impassable roads, and pockets. Some of the side streets in this district may have depressed turnout, but that doesn't change the fundamental dynamics here. This is a race with outsized importance for a couple of reasons. The Democrats win this, they can further shrink that already narrow majority U.S. House Republicans have, and at an inopportune time with some critical matters coming, including a government shutdown deadline March 1st. But also, it has the distinction of being one of those rare, few congressional swing districts, a good test case of messages and campaign strategy ahead of November. A lot of the late rush here focused on the issue of immigration and border security. It kind of paralleled the action in the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House. The Democrat Tom Suozzi told me he is leaning into his arguments about immigration, trying to diffuse the bomb of the Republicans' arguments. Meanwhile, the Republican candidate is saying she's leaning in because she believes the Homeland Security Secretary should be impeached and that Republicans should toe a harder line on immigration issues than Congress has currently been considering. This is a test case. We'll see how both parties and both candidates fare with that as the backstory.
Well, this is a district that President Biden won back in 2020, Scott, and I wonder if Suozzi is using that at all as he tries to make his own case.
Well, you don't hear him talking about President Biden much. You do hear him talking about George Santos quite a bit. He's weaving a narrative that's heavy on biography, not to be outdone by his opponent. He's trying to lean into the fact that he had 3 terms representing this area in Congress previously, making an experience argument. And I think Republicans trying to oppose Mr. Suozzi are making that reverse argument, that a change agent is needed, a new voice, a fresh face. But I'll tell you, some of the voters with whom we spoke today recognize they elected a fresh face in 2022. it did not go well. But they are turning the page on George Santos officially. By every expectation here, a close race in what is, by its fundamental dynamics, a narrowly divided district.
Talking about the George Santos factor, Scott, is there any kind of resentment toward Republicans in this district because of who was elected in 2022? Could it hurt them, you know, even though he's gone now out of the picture?
We asked the Republican candidate that question today. Mazi Pilip, point blank, we asked her, is the George Santos experience potentially going to depress turnout, including among Republicans? And she said no, that this is a new chapter. This is change. Not a surprising response here. I think that's a test case in this race. Does the George Santos experience impact the odds of the Republican candidate in a face-off with a Democrat? This also may speak volumes about what either party wants to do, trying to distance themselves from somebody charged with federal crimes who has high office, or trying to weave their own narrative, tell their own personal story versus talking about others in the party. What a laboratory we have here tonight on Long Island in New York for every campaign across the country to study and learn from. That's why the results are so eagerly anticipated.
No shortage of drama or impact in this race. Scott McFarland, thank you. We'll check in with you again sometime for more. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, next, our political panel looks at the 2024 race, including Biden re-election campaign concerns. You're streaming America Decides.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has a glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's a country music legend, philanthropist, fashion icon, and now rock star.
I think there's a lot to be said about being comfortable with who you are.
Find out what's next for Dolly Parton when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That Desired Farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power. Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She is a beloved American icon and head of a media empire. But is Oprah Winfrey happy? How do you define happiness?
Yeah, I call it happierness.
Find out when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. President Biden's allies are fighting back against the special counsel's report, raising new questions about his mental fitness. Meanwhile, Vice President Harris is saying she would be ready if needed. She told the Wall Street Journal, quote, "I am ready to serve. There's no question about that," and that everyone who sees her on the job, quote, "walks away fully aware of my capacity to lead." Maura Gillespie and Ashley Etienne join us now. Maura is a former advisor to Speaker Boehner and Congressman Kinzinger. And Ashley is a CBS News political contributor and former communications director to Vice President Harris. Ashley, I want to start with you because it's not a surprise that the vice president made these remarks, which could apply to any vice president, but it's different given the president's health concerns, his age. What do you make of her comments here? And is there any concern that they could backfire if people don't want to vote for Harris for president?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I would start by saying there are no health concerns for the president. That's not proven. But here's the thing: the vice president said that she's ready to serve. I think the question, though, is the country ready for a woman in the top job? Every day on the trail, and this is the same question, by the way, being asked of Nikki Haley, that's confronting her as well. And every day on the trail and every day in the job, she tries to sort of challenge that theory that America is ready to see a woman in the top job. I'm not so sure of it. But she actually is leaning in, and I think ways that really matter. I was just at the White House for the Black History Month event, and the president talked about how she's been leading on an array of issues from reproductive rights to climate change, to her leaning in aggressively in foreign policy spaces, the war in Israel and other in China and in Africa and other places all over the world. So she's really demonstrating her chops in terms of policies, in terms of her ability to galvanize constituencies that are important to the Democratic Party. But I think it just gets back to this question, whether or not the country has a bias against a woman in this job.
Well, Harris was fiercely critical of Special Counsel Robert Hur. And you're right, I'm not a doctor, neither is Hur. But in this special counsel's report, he did lay out observations about the president's memory. And I wonder, how concerned do you think the campaign should be over these details, and how do they fight against it?
Well, I mean, there are many within the Democratic Party that are really saying, what do we expect? I mean, when the Attorney General appointed a Trump appointee who was a top lieutenant in his Department of Justice, what did we expect? We kind of expected at some point that he was going to use this as an opportunity to take shots at the president. It's, there's talk within the party that this is sort of a similar Jim Comey sort of a moment for the party right now. But I don't think that this is sort of hair on fire moment for the campaign. This is a very manageable issue and problem for the president. It's a matter of putting him in the right places in the spaces with the right formats to really show him as a strong leader, really. But here's the thing, you compare that to where Donald Trump is. His problems are only mounting. He's going to be in court every day. There's no question. There's still questions out about he could actually be in jail by the time of the convention. Who knows? So I think when you compare the two, that Biden has a very manageable issue compared to Donald Trump, where we're not sure. There's a level of uncertainty there that could really tank his chances.
And Maura, despite what Ashley just laid out about the former president, he is still in the lead in South Carolina, where Nikki Haley is campaigning in her home state. Is there anything she can do to try to cut through that lead and win?
I think what she's doing, is hitting back on a lot of his comments. I'm glad that she's finally taking it to Donald Trump, the former president, especially in regards to his comments about her husband, and really firing up, hopefully, the veteran community and those who respect our men and women in uniform. I think by really targeting some of the things that he has said and some of the things that he has done, and pointing them out and reminding voters who Donald Trump is and why it's time to move on from this to pass the torch to the next generation. And I think that really is a concern that a lot of people have, both with Biden and Trump. Their age is a factor. Their mental acuity is a factor. Listen, being on television or giving speeches is tough. We all make mistakes, and it can be nerve-wracking. But we need the leader of our country to put out a strong representation of our country. He needs to be strong and forceful, and you're representing us on the world stage. You're the leader of the free world, and we need someone who is in full command. And so I think, unfortunately, in this scenario, if Trump versus Biden is the ultimate two nominees here, then we're the ones that lose. We, the American people, because neither Biden nor Trump are fit to serve as president. And I think that it's a shame for us that someone like Nikki Haley isn't going to get to the top spot.
And I want to ask you about news of the day, because obviously we're tracking New York's 3rd congressional district to replace George Santos. Are you viewing that race as a bellwether in these critical swing areas in the country?
Not exactly. I think it'll be an important for House Republicans to keep an eye on. Obviously, their majority is so thin, and with some of the things that they're trying to get done, especially even tonight into tomorrow, this does really matter because, again, it all comes down to being a numbers game. But I don't think that it's going to dictate what happens on Election Day in 2024. I think with the border concerns, Swazi is, really hitting on that, trying to push back on some of the narratives that have come out against him. And, we'll see how that kind of shakes out for him. But it is an important discussion. And I don't know that the Republicans are messaging it to the benefit that they could be, because at the end of the day, when it comes to what we should be encouraging, if we are trying to hold the Biden-Harris administration accountable for the failings of the border, the best way to do that is on Election Day. It is not by asking members of Congress to circumvent the Constitution and go against their oaths. That's not how we do that.
We will be watching. Thank you so much, Maura Gillespie and Ashley Etienne.
Thank you.
That does it for today. We will be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
Original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would